The transport shuttle landed with a soft hum on the silver platform of the Galactic Union Academy. The doors opened slowly, and hundreds of alien cadets stepped out into the bright light of 3 suns. They came from many worlds. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had skin made of crystal that caught the light and sparkled like diamonds. They were tall and strong and proud. They walked with confidence because they had been chosen from millions to train at the most famous military academy in the galaxy. Yuna stepped out last. She was human. She was small. She stood barely 5 feet tall, and her body was thin. She had dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail and eyes that watched everything but revealed nothing. She carried a single bag over her shoulder and wore the standard gray uniform that all new cadets received. On her chest was a small patch that showed her planet of origin, Earth, Category 7 Deathworld. The moment she appeared, the whispers started. A group of Kethani cadets stopped walking and stared at her. The Kethani were tall creatures with 4 arms and 4 legs. Their bodies were covered in hard plates like armor, and their faces had sharp mandibles that clicked when they spoke. One of them pointed at Yuna with a long, jointed finger. "That is a Deathworlder?" the Kethani asked. Her name was Pyrrha, and she was one of the top-ranked cadets from her world. There must be a mistake in the records. Her companion, another Kethani, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "I expected something dangerous. Something with claws or fangs or poison. She looks like she would break if I touched her." Pyrrha laughed. It was a strange sound, like stones rubbing together. Perhaps the humans sent us their weakest as a joke. Or perhaps their planet is not as deadly as the reports say. Yuna walked past them without looking. She had heard every word, but her face showed nothing. She had learned long ago that words were just sounds. They could not hurt her unless she let them. The academy was massive. It was built on an artificial moon that orbited a gas giant, and it could hold over 50,000 cadets from across the galaxy. The buildings were tall and white, made from materials that humans had never seen before. The air was clean and cool, filtered through machines that could make any atmosphere safe for any species. Signs in hundreds of languages pointed toward dormitories, training halls, medical centers, and dining facilities. Yuna followed the signs to the dormitory for new cadets. Her room was on the 7th floor of a building shaped like a spiral. When she opened the door, she found that her roommate was already there. It was Pyrrha. The Kethani was unpacking her belongings when Yuna entered. She had many things: weapons from her homeworld, trophies from competitions, photographs of her family standing in front of a massive stone fortress. She looked up when the door opened, and her mandibles spread wide in surprise. "You?" Pyrrha said. "You are my roommate?" "Yes," Yuna said simply. She walked to the empty side of the room and set down her bag. Pyrrha watched her with eyes that had no pupils, just solid black surfaces that reflected light. "I requested a roommate from a warrior species. I specifically asked for someone strong." "I am sorry to disappoint you," Yuna said. She opened her bag and began to unpack. She had very few things: a worn journal with handwritten notes, a small plant cutting in a plastic container, a photograph of an old woman with kind eyes and deep wrinkles. Pyrrha stepped closer, looking at the items with curiosity and contempt. "Is that all you brought? No weapons? No trophies?" "I do not have any," Yuna said. "Then what did you do on your world? How did you earn your place here?" Yuna placed the photograph gently on her small desk. "I survived." Pyrrha did not understand. On her world, strength was everything. The Kethani had fought wars for thousands of years. Their children trained in combat before they could walk. Every adult carried scars from battles won and lost. The idea that survival alone could be an achievement was strange to her. You will not last long here, Pyrrha said finally. The combat exam is in 30 cycles. Cadets who fail are sent home in shame. Cadets who are too weak do not even make it to the exam. They withdraw before they can embarrass themselves. I understand, Yuna said. Do you? Because I have seen your records. Humans are new to the galaxy. Your species was only discovered 20 years ago. The Union classified your planet as a death world because of its environment, the gravity, the predators, the diseases, the natural disasters. They expected humans to be monsters. Instead, we get. Pyrrha gestured at Yuna with all 4 arms. This. Yuna climbed into her bunk without responding. She lay on her back and looked at the ceiling, her hands folded on her stomach. Pyrrha waited for a reaction. An argument. Tears. Anger. Something. She got nothing. Are you not going to defend yourself? Pyrrha demanded. There is nothing to defend, Yuna said quietly. You have your opinions. I have mine. Words will not change either. Pyrrha made a sound of disgust and turned away. She decided that her roommate was not worth her attention. The human was clearly a mistake, a bureaucratic error that would be corrected when she failed the exam and was sent back to her strange, overhyped planet. The next morning, all new cadets were summoned to the Great Hall for orientation. The hall was enormous, large enough to hold 10,000 beings at once. The walls were covered with banners from every member world of the Galactic Union, and at the front was a stage where the Academy's commanders sat in high-backed chairs. Commander Tovik rose to speak. He was a Dorothy, one of the largest species in the galaxy. The Dorothy stood over 8 feet tall and weighed as much as small vehicles. Their skin was thick and gray, like the hide of an elephant, and their faces were flat with small eyes and wide mouths filled with grinding teeth. They were known as the galaxy's greatest warriors, undefeated in ground combat for over 1,000 years. Welcome to the Galactic Union Academy, Tovik said. His voice was deep and rumbled like thunder. You are here because your worlds believe you are worthy. But belief is not proof. Over the next 30 cycles, you will be tested. Your bodies will be tested. Your minds will be tested. Your spirits will be tested. Many of you will fail. He paused, and his small eyes scanned the crowd. They stopped on Yuna. Some of you should not be here at all. He continued, still looking at her. The combat exam will reveal who belongs and who does not. If you know you cannot pass, I suggest you withdraw now. There is no shame in knowing your limits. There is only shame in wasting everyone's time. Yuna met his gaze without blinking. Her face was calm, patient, unreadable. After the orientation, Tovik called her to his office. The office was large and filled with trophies from Tovik's long career. Weapons hung on the walls. Medals were displayed in glass cases. The skull of some massive creature sat on a shelf behind his desk. Sit, Tovik ordered. Yuna sat. I have read your file, Tovik said. I have also read the reports on your species. Earth is classified as a death world, but I see no evidence of that classification in you. You are small. You are weak. You have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no venom, no armor. Your bones are fragile. Your skin tears easily. You cannot run fast or jump high or lift heavy things. He leaned forward. Why are you here? To learn, Yuna said. To learn what? How to die? Because that is what will happen if you enter the combat exam. You will face species that have been bred for war for 10,000 years. They will hurt you. Perhaps they will kill you. Yuna's expression did not change. I understand the risks. Do you? Tovik shook his head. I do not think you do. I have seen humans before. Your species is strange. You come from a world that should produce monsters, but instead you are soft, emotional, you form attachments. You feel pain deeply. He pointed at her. You are not ready for this. With respect, Commander, Yuna said. You do not know what I am ready for. Tovik stared at her for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. You have 30 cycles. Train hard. Prepare yourself. And when you realize you cannot win, come to me. I will arrange your transport home quietly. No one needs to know you failed. Yuna stood and bowed. Thank you for your concern, Commander. She left the office without another word. That night, alone in her bunk while Pyrrha slept, Yuna opened her journal and began to write. She wrote about the academy, the species she had seen, the layout of the buildings, the schedules posted on the walls. She wrote about Pyrrha's weaknesses, the slight limp in her third leg, the way she favored her upper right arm. She wrote about Tovik's office, the weapons on his walls, the medals in his cases. She had learned long ago that knowledge was power, and power was survival. Her grandmother had taught her that. Yuna looked at the photograph on her desk. The old woman smiled back at her, frozen in time. I will not fail, grandmother, Yuna whispered. I promise. She closed the journal, turned off the light, and slept. The days passed slowly at the Galactic Union Academy. Each morning began with a loud alarm that echoed through the dormitories, pulling cadets from their sleep. They would dress quickly, eat breakfast in the massive dining hall, and then report to their assigned training areas. The schedule was strict. There was no room for laziness or excuses. Yuna followed the schedule perfectly. She woke before the alarm, dressed in silence, and left the room while Pyrrha was still stretching her forearms and complaining about the early hour. She ate her meals alone at a small table in the corner of the dining hall, always finishing every bite on her plate. She attended every lecture, every physical training session, every tactical simulation. She was never late. She never missed anything, and nobody noticed her. The other cadets had more interesting things to focus on. There was a Valorian cadet named Hyuk who had become famous in the first week. The Valorians were a beautiful species, tall and graceful with skin made of living crystal. Their bodies refracted light in stunning patterns, and they could survive in environments that would kill most other beings. Hyuk was one of the brightest among them. He moved like water, smooth and controlled, and his combat skills were already impressive. There was also a Dorothy cadet named Goro, who's related to Commander Tovik. Goro was massive, even by Dorothy standards, standing nearly 9 feet tall with arms as thick as tree trunks. He had won every sparring match in training without any effort. His opponents would charge at him, and he would simply grab them and throw them across the room. Some cadets had been injured. A few had withdrawn from the academy because of him. And then there was Pyrrha, who had formed a group of Kethany cadets who trained together every evening. They practiced ancient fighting techniques passed down through generations. They boasted about their victories in local competitions back home. They made plans for the combat exam, discussing strategies and predicting who would be easy to defeat. Yuna's name came up often in those discussions. She does nothing, Pyrrha said one evening, her mandibles clicking with amusement. She goes to lectures and takes notes in some strange language. She runs the physical courses at average speed. She does not spar with anyone. She does not practice combat. She just exists. Perhaps she is hoping to be overlooked, one of her companions suggested. If the instructors forget about her, maybe they will not assign her to the exam. Pyrrha shook her head. That is not how it works. Every cadet must take the exam. There are no exceptions. She will face someone in the arena, and she will lose. Quickly. Badly. The only question is how much she will embarrass herself before it is over. What Pyrrha did not know was that Yuna was listening. She was always listening. The human had developed a routine that was invisible to everyone else. During lectures, she sat in the back of the room, behind species that were taller than her. She took notes, but she also watched. She studied how different species moved, how they held their bodies, where they looked when they were nervous or confident or lying. She noticed that Dorothy had difficulty turning their heads quickly because of their thick necks. She noticed that Cathini could not move backward easily because of how their legs were jointed. She noticed that Valorians became slightly dimmer when they were tired or stressed out. She wrote everything down. During physical training, she ran the courses at exactly average speed. Not slow enough to draw attention, not fast enough to stand out. She completed every obstacle, passed every test, and kept her breathing steady even when her lungs burned and her legs screamed for rest. The instructors marked her as acceptable, and moved on to more impressive cadets. But during the free periods between training sessions, Yuna disappeared. She found quiet places in the academy where few cadets went. The library, which held records from 1,000 worlds. The observation deck, which looked out at the stars. The medical center archives, which contained anatomical information about every species in the Union. She spent hours reading, learning, memorizing. She studied pressure points and nerve clusters. She studied how joints connected and where bones were weakest. She studied the history of combat across the galaxy, reading about tactics that had won battles and mistakes that had lost wars. One evening, Hugh found her in the library. The Valorian had been searching for a specific text on energy manipulation when he noticed the small human, sitting in a dark corner, surrounded by holographic displays of alien anatomy. He paused, curious. He had seen her in the dining hall and in lectures, but he had never spoken to her. Like everyone else, he had assumed she was unremarkable. Now, watching her study with intense focus, he was not so sure. "You are the human," he said, approaching her table. Yuna looked up. Her face showed no surprise, no fear, no excitement, just calm acknowledgement. "Yes, I am Hugh. I have noticed you in training." "I know who you are," Yuna said. "You are the Valorian who completed the zero-gravity obstacle course in record time. Your crystalline body gives you advantages in low-friction environments." Hugh's crystal skin flickered with colors that indicated surprise among his people. "You noticed that?" "I noticed many things." He sat down across from her, studying her with new interest. "What are you doing here?" "These displays show Dorothy anatomy." "Are you planning to face one of them in the exam?" "I am planning for every possibility," Yuna said. "That seems thorough. Most cadets focus on their own strengths. They trust their natural abilities to carry them through." Yuna closed one of the holographic displays and looked at him directly. "What natural abilities do you think I have?" Hugh considered the question carefully. He looked at her small body, her thin arms, her soft skin. He tried to think of any advantage she might have, and he could not find one. "I do not know," he admitted. "Neither does anyone else," Yuna said. "That is why I study." She returned to her work, and Hugh watched her for a moment longer. There was something in her eyes that he had not seen before. Not fear, not desperation. Something colder, sharper, like a blade hidden inside cloth. He remembered that look in the second week. The training became harder. The instructors introduced sparring matches, forcing cadets to fight each other under controlled conditions. Medical officers stood ready to treat injuries, and the matches were stopped before anyone could be seriously hurt. But the message was clear. The combat exam would be much worse. Yuna was assigned to fight, a Cathani cadet on her 5th day of sparring. It was not Pyrrha, just one of her companions, a male named Tycho, who was eager to prove himself by defeating the weak human. The match lasted 30 seconds. Tycho charged at Yuna with all 4 arms extended, confident that he could grab her and pin her immediately. She stepped to the side at the last moment, and he passed by her harmlessly. He turned, confused, and charged again. She dodged again. He swung at her with his upper arms. She ducked. He kicked with his back legs. She jumped. She never hit him. She never tried to win. She simply avoided every attack until the time limit expired and the match was declared a draw. The instructors noted that she had displayed adequate defensive skills. The other cadets laughed at her cowardice, but Hugh noticed something else. He noticed that Yuna's breathing had remained steady throughout the match. He noticed that she had moved with precision, always just far enough to avoid contact. He noticed that her eyes had tracked Tico's every movement before he made it, as if she knew what he would do before he did it. She had not been running away. She had been studying. That night, Hyuk approached her in the dining hall. She was eating alone, as always, finishing every bite on her plate. "You could have won that match," he said, sitting across from her without asking permission. Yuna looked up. "Could I?" "You knew exactly where he would move before he moved. I watched you. You were not afraid. You were not desperate. You were analyzing him. And what would winning that match have given me?" Hyuk paused. He thought about the question carefully. "Pride? Respect? Proof that you are not weak?" Yuna set down her fork. "If I had won, Tycho would have learned from his mistakes. He would have trained harder. He would have been more careful in the exam. His friends would have studied me, looking for weaknesses." She picked up her fork again. "By drawing, I taught him nothing. He believes I am weak. His friends believe I am weak. They will not prepare for me. They will underestimate me." "You are hiding your abilities," Hugh said slowly. "I am surviving," Yuna corrected. "On my world, the creatures that boast about their strength are the first to be killed. The ones that stay quiet, that watch, that wait, they are the ones that live longest." Hyuk's crystalline skin rippled with patterns of new understanding. "Your world truly is a death world." "Yes," Yuna said, "but not for the reasons you think." She finished her meal, cleaned her plate, and left the dining hall without another word. The cycles continued to pass. The combat exam grew closer. Cadets trained harder, pushed themselves further, and boasted louder about their coming victories. Pyrrha told everyone who would listen that she expected to finish in the top 10. Goro said nothing at all. His size and strength made boasting unnecessary. Yuna remained invisible. She attended training. She completed courses. She read books. She wrote in her journal. The night before the exam, Pyrrha found her standing on the observation deck. The human was looking out at the stars, her reflection visible in the transparent walls. Her face was calm. The Arena of Proving was the oldest structure at the Galactic Union Academy. It had been built over 2,000 years ago by the first species to join the Union, and it had seen millions of cadets pass through its gates. The arena was circular, nearly a mile across, and its walls were made of metal so strong that nothing had ever damaged them. Inside, advanced technology could create any environment: deserts, forests, oceans, mountains, cities, or anything else the instructors wanted. Cadets who entered the arena faced challenges that tested every skill they had. Many cadets entered the arena confident. Not all of them left the same way. On the morning of the combat exam, all first-year cadets gathered in the staging area outside the arena. They wore their training uniforms and carried small packs with emergency supplies. Medical teams stood ready along the walls, their equipment prepared to treat any injury. Combat drones floated overhead, recording everything for the instructors to review later. Commander Tovik stood on a raised platform at the front of the crowd. His massive Dorathi body blocked the light behind him, casting a shadow over the nervous cadets. "The combat exam has 3 phases," he announced. his deep voice echoing across the staging area. First is survival. You will be placed in a hostile environment and given 6 hours to reach the extraction point. Second is pursuit. You will be hunted by combat drones across difficult terrain. Third is direct combat. You will fight another cadet in single battle. He paused, letting the words sink in. Failure in any phase means elimination from the exam. Elimination means you are not worthy of this academy. Some of you will fail today. Some of you should have never come. Some never come. His eyes moved across the crowd and stopped, as always. On Yuna, begin the first phase. The cadets were loaded into transport pods and launched toward different locations across the arena. The environment for the survival phase was a toxic swamp miles of murky water, poisonous plants, and aggressive creatures hidden beneath the surface. The air was thick with chemicals that made breathing difficult for most species. The ground was soft and unstable, ready to swallow anyone who stepped in the wrong place. Yuna's pod landed in the deepest part of the swamp, far from the extraction point. When the door opened, she was immediately hit by a wall of humid, poisonous air. Her lungs burned with each breath, and her eyes watered from the chemicals. The water around her was dark green and smelled of rot. She did not panic. She had prepared for this. Before leaving the pod, she tore a strip of cloth from her uniform and wrapped it around her nose and mouth. It would not filter all the toxins, but it would slow the damage to her lungs. She checked the small device on her wrist that showed the direction of the extraction point. It was north, nearly 4 miles away through the thickest part of the swamp. 4 miles. 6 hours. She could do this. She stepped into the water carefully, testing the ground before putting her full weight on it. The bottom was covered with thick mud that sucked at her boots, trying to drag her down. She found a rhythm step. Test, shift weight, repeat. It was slow. It was exhausting. But it was safe. Other cadets were not so careful. Across the swamp, Yuna could hear splashing and shouting. A Kefani cadet was struggling in deep water, her armor-plated body too heavy to float. A Valorian was stuck in a patch of mud that was slowly pulling him under. Somewhere in the distance, something large roared, and a scream cut through the air before going silent. The instructors watched through the surveillance drones. On their screens, they tracked the location and status of every cadet. Some were making good progress. Others had already triggered the emergency beacons that would pull them from the arena and end their exam. Yuna's signal moved slowly but steadily northward for 2 hours. Then it stopped. The instructors assumed she had died or been injured. They watched the signal, waiting for the emergency beacon to activate. It did not. The signal simply sat in one place, unmoving, in the middle of a dense cluster of dangerous flora. "She is finished," one instructor said. "She must have been taken by the swamp creatures." "We should send a recovery team," another suggested. Commander Tovik shook his head. "Wait. She has not activated her beacon. The rules say we do not intervene unless the cadet requests help or shows signs of life-threatening injury." They waited. 1 hour passed. Then another. At the 4-hour mark, Yuna's signal began moving again. But not slowly. It moved quickly now, faster than any of her previous progress. Within 30 minutes, she had covered more than a mile. Within another hour, she appeared at the extraction point. She was the 3rd cadet to arrive. Her uniform was covered in mud and plant matter. Her skin was pale from the toxic exposure. But her breathing was steady, and when she looked at the instructors waiting at the extraction point, her eyes were clear and calm. "How did you do that?" one of the instructors demanded. He was a Valorian, and his crystalline skin flickered with colors of confusion. "Your signal was stationary for over 2 hours. We thought you were dead. Yuna wiped some mud from her face. I was resting. Resting? In the middle of the swamp. I found a place where the creatures did not go. A high spot covered with plants they avoided. I climbed up, caught my breath, and watched the swamp. Watched it? For what purpose? To learn. Yuna pointed back toward the swamp. The creatures here have patterns. They hunt in specific areas and avoid others. The paths they avoid are safer. I followed those paths. The instructor stared at her. You use the predators to guide you. Their fear guided me, Yuna corrected. They were afraid of something deeper in the swamp. I stayed in the areas they feared. Before the instructor could respond, the next phase began. The pursuit challenge took place in a different section of the arena, a ruined city filled with collapsed buildings, dark tunnels, and dangerous obstacles. Cadets were dropped into the city and given 1 hour to avoid capture by combat drones. The drones were programmed to match the physical capabilities of whatever species they were hunting. Fast species faced fast drones. Strong species faced strong drones. Yuna's drones were calibrated for human capability. The instructors assumed this meant they would be slow and weak, easy for even a basic cadet to avoid. They were wrong about what human capability meant. The drones entered the city expecting to find an easy target. Instead, they found nothing. Yuna had disappeared into the ruins within seconds of being dropped, and she left no trail for the drones to follow. Their sensors scanned for heat signatures, but she had covered herself in mud from the swamp, masking her body temperature. They listened for footsteps, but she moved silently, placing each step on solid ground that made no sound. She doubled back through her own tracks, confusing the drone algorithms. She used reflective surfaces from broken windows to create false heat signatures. She crawled through spaces too small for the drones to enter and waited perfectly still while they searched past her. The hour ended. Yuna walked out of the ruins without a single hit registered against her. The instructors were silent. On their screens, they reviewed the footage from the drones, watching the small human outmaneuver machines that should have caught her easily. She had not used speed or strength. She had used patience, misdirection, intelligence. Pyrrha had been eliminated in the first 20 minutes. She had relied on her natural speed and agility, thinking she could outrun the drones. But speed meant nothing when your opponent could track you across any terrain. The drones had cornered her in a collapsed building and tagged her 17 times before she could escape. When she emerged from the city, her armor-plated body was covered in paint marks from the drone hits. Her mandibles clicked with fury as she saw Yuna standing calmly at the observation area, untouched. "How?" Pyrrha demanded. "How did you survive when I could not?" Yuna looked at her roommate. "You ran." "I hid. Running is easy to track. Hiding is not. But you are weak. You are slow. You should have been caught immediately." "Should have," Yuna agreed. "But I was not." Pyrrha had no response. For the first time since they had met, she looked at the human with something other than contempt. There was confusion in her black eyes. And beneath that confusion, there was the beginning of something else. Fear. The final phase would be direct combat. Cadets who had survived both previous phases were randomly matched against each other. They would fight in a simple arena with no obstacles, no tricks, no hiding places. Just two bodies and whatever skills they had developed. The matches began immediately. Yuna sat in the waiting area, watching the other fights on a large display screen. She saw Hyuk defeat a Kethany with elegant flowing movements that made his crystalline body blur like water. She saw a female Dorothy overpower 3 opponents in a row through pure strength. She saw cadets from species she had never heard of use abilities she had never imagined. And then she saw her assignment. Her opponent was Goro, the massive Dorothy. the cadet who had never been defeated, the nephew of Commander Tovik. Around her, the other surviving cadets went quiet. They looked at the small human sitting in the corner, and they looked at the giant monster she was supposed to fight. Some of them laughed. Some of them looked away, unwilling to watch what they knew would be a slaughter. Hyuk approached her. His crystalline skin was dim with concern. "This match is unfair. You should request a replacement opponent." The ground shook beneath his massive feet as he rushed toward the small human standing in the center of the arena. His arms were raised, ready to grab her and crush her. His eyes were focused on his target. He had done this 100 times before. He would reach his opponent, seize them with his powerful hands, and end the fight before it truly began. That was how Dorothy fought. That was how Dorothy won. Yuna did not move. The crowd leaned forward. Some covered their eyes. Others prepared to look away at the moment of impact. A few were already celebrating Goro's victory. And then, at the last possible second, Yuna moved. Not backward. Not to the side. At an angle. She slipped past his reaching arm so closely that his fingers brushed her shoulder. But his fingers found nothing to grip. She was already gone, sliding around him like smoke flowing through the gaps in a fence. His massive body carried him forward with unstoppable momentum, and suddenly he was facing empty air. He stumbled. Not much. Just a single step. But it was enough. Before he could recover, Yuna was behind him. Her hand shot out and touched his wrist. Just a light touch, barely visible to the cameras recording the fight. But her fingers found the exact spot where the nerves crossed beneath his thick hide. A spot she had memorized from the anatomical records in the library. A spot no one had ever thought to attack because Dorothy's skin was supposed to be too thick to penetrate. The nerves were not protected by skin. They were protected by muscle and hide, yes, but the signals they carried still flowed close to the surface at specific points. Points that a Dorothy would never think to guard because they had never needed to. Goro's right arm went limp. He roared in surprise and spun around, swinging his left arm in a wild arc that should have taken her head off. But she was not there. She had moved again, ducking beneath his swing and stepping to his blind side. The Dorothy had small eyes set wide on their flat faces. Their vision was powerful but slow. They could not track fast movements in their peripheral vision. Yuna knew this. She had read about it. She had watched Goro spar in training, noting how his head turned slowly when opponents moved to his sides. She had counted the seconds it took him to redirect his attention. She had practiced moving in that exact rhythm. Now she used it. She struck again, this time hitting a pressure point behind his knee. His leg buckled slightly. He tried to turn to face her, but she was already on his other side, hitting another nerve cluster at the base of his skull. His left arm began to shake uncontrollably. The crowd was silent. This was not combat. This was something else. Something they had never seen before. The small human was not fighting the Dorothy warrior. She was dismantling him, piece by piece, nerve by nerve, strike by strike. Goro bellowed with fury. He stopped trying to grab her and started swinging wildly, using his massive body as a weapon. His fists crashed into the ground, creating craters in the arena floor. His legs kicked out in all directions. Any contact would be fatal. A single hit from those arms would break every bone in her body. But no hit landed. Yuna was never where the hits landed. She flowed around him like water around a stone, always just beyond his reach, always appearing exactly where he was not looking. And each time she passed him, she struck. Small strikes. Precise strikes. Strikes that did no visible damage, but accumulated with terrible efficiency. His right arm was now completely dead, hanging at his side like a piece of meat. His left leg was losing strength, forcing him to favor his right. His breathing was becoming ragged as the nerve strikes began affecting his diaphragm. Sweat poured down his gray hide, something Dorothy rarely experienced because their bodies were built to handle extreme stress. But this stress was different. This stress came from inside. Commander Tovik watched from the observation platform, his massive body frozen with shock. He had trained Goro himself. He knew every one of the young Dorothy's abilities and limits. He had believed that no one at this academy could defeat his nephew in direct combat. He had been wrong. The human was not using strength. She was not using speed. She was using knowledge perfect. Detailed knowledge of Dorothy anatomy that she had somehow acquired and learned to apply in the middle of combat. Every strike was calculated. Every movement was planned. She was fighting like nothing he had ever seen before. No, that was not quite right. She was fighting like prey that had learned to hunt. In the arena, Goro fell to one knee. Both of his arms were now disabled. His legs were shaking with exhaustion and nerve damage. His breathing came in short, painful gasps. He looked up at the small human standing before him, and for the first time in his life, he felt something he had never experienced. Fear. "What are you?" he gasped. Yuna stood before him, calm and still. She was not even breathing heavily. Her uniform was slightly dirty from dodging his attacks, but she had not taken a single hit. "Not one. I am human," she said simply. "Humans are supposed to be weak." "We were weak," Yuna agreed. "Long ago, when we first appeared on our world, we were the weakest creatures there. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom. Every other creature was stronger than us, faster than us, more dangerous than us. We should have died." She stepped closer to him, looking up at his massive face. "But we did not die. We learned. We watched the creatures that hunted us, and we understood them. We found their weaknesses. We made tools from stones and sticks. We worked together. We planned. And eventually, we stopped being prey." Her voice was soft, but in the silent arena, everyone could hear her. "Everything on our world is dangerous. The plants, the animals, the weather, even the water. We survived all of it. Not because we were strong, because we were patient, because we were willing to learn, because we never stopped adapting." Goro stared at her. His small eyes were wide with an emotion he did not know how to process. "Your kind has been fighting for 10,000 years, Yuna continued. "You have won every battle through strength. You have never needed to think about strategy or weakness or vulnerability. Why would you? You were always the strongest." She knelt down so her eyes were level with his. "But I have spent 30 cycles thinking about nothing else. I have read every book in your library about Dorothy anatomy. I have watched every recording of Dorothy combat. I have counted your heartbeats during sparring matches. I have measured the speed of your reflexes. I have mapped every nerve cluster in your body and practiced hitting them in my room at night while my roommates slept." Her dark eyes held his. "You thought you were facing a weak creature. You were facing a Deathworlder." The word hung in the air. "Yield," Yuna said. "Not a demand. Not an order. An offer. You have fought well. There is no shame in losing to an opponent you did not understand." For a long moment, Goro did not move. His massive body remained on one knee, trembling with exhaustion and damage. His pride screamed at him to continue fighting, to push through the pain, to prove that Dorothy warriors never surrendered. But his body would not obey. And somewhere deep inside, a part of him understood that continuing would only mean more pain, more damage, more humiliation. Slowly, he lowered his head. "I yield," he said. The arena was completely silent. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a sound began. a strange, crystalline chiming. It was Hyuk, standing and striking his hands together in the human gesture of applause that Yuna had taught him. His crystal skin flickered with colors of amazement and respect. Others joined him. First a few, then more, then hundreds. Species that had never clapped before created their own versions of the sound, mandibles clicking, tentacles slapping, throats vibrating with approval. The noise grew until it filled the entire arena, echoing off the ancient walls. Medical officers rushed forward to treat Goro. They were shocked at the precision of the damage. Every strike had been placed exactly where it would cause maximum effect without permanent harm. His arms and legs would recover. His nerves would heal. He would fight again. But he would never forget this day. Yuna walked out of the arena without looking back. Her face showed no pride, no triumph, no emotion at all. She had done what needed to be done. She had proven what needed to be proven. Now she just wanted to rest. Commander Tovik intercepted her at the exit. The massive Dorothy stood in her path, blocking the doorway with his enormous body. His face was unreadable. Yuna stopped and looked up at him, waiting. "I have watched combat for 50 years, Tovik said slowly. "I have trained warriors from 100 worlds. I have seen things that would make most beings go mad with fear." He paused. "I have never seen anything like what you just did." "It was just a fight," Yuna said. "No," Tovik shook his head. "It was a lesson. A lesson for my nephew. A lesson for the Academy. A lesson for the entire galaxy." He stepped aside, opening the doorway. "You are more than I thought you were, Cadet Yuna. Much more." Yuna bowed slightly. "Thank you, Commander." She walked past him into the corridor beyond. The sound of applause still echoed behind her, following her like a wave. Ahead, she saw Hyuk waiting for her, his crystalline form bright with excitement. "That was incredible," he said. "I have never seen anyone move like that. Where did you learn to fight?" "From books," Yuna said. "And from watching? Books?" Hyuk's skin flickered with confusion. "You learned to defeat a Dorothy warrior from books?" "Books are where knowledge lives. Knowledge is the greatest weapon." The academy was quiet that night. Most cadets had returned to their dormitories after the combat exam, exhausted from the physical and emotional strain of the day. Some were celebrating their victories. Others were nursing their wounds, both physical and psychological. A few had already begun packing their belongings, preparing to return home in shame after failing the exam. Yuna sat alone in her room, looking at the photograph of her grandmother. The old woman's kind eyes seemed to look back at her, filled with the wisdom of someone who had survived things that no one should ever have to survive. "I did it, Grandmother," Yuna whispered. "I showed them what we are." A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She set down the photograph and walked over to open it. "Commander." Tovik stood in the hallway. The massive Dorothy had to duck to fit through the doorframe, and even then his broad shoulders barely cleared the entrance. His presence filled the small room completely, making everything around him seem like toys in a child's playhouse. "Cadet Yuna," he said, "I would like to speak with you." "Of course, Commander." She gestured toward the single chair in the room, knowing that it would never hold his weight. Tovik understood and remained standing, his massive body taking up most of the available space. "I have reviewed the recordings of your combat exam," he said. "All 3 phases. Multiple times." His small eyes studied her face. "I have questions. I will answer what I can," Yuna said. "In the survival phase, you rested for 2 hours in the middle of a toxic swamp filled with deadly creatures. How did you know that location was safe?" "I watched the creatures when I first entered the swamp. They avoided certain areas. I followed their fear to find places where even they would not go. If the predators were afraid, then something more dangerous was protecting those spaces. I trusted that protection. And in the pursuit phase, the drones were calibrated for human capability. They should have found you easily. They were calibrated for what the Academy assumed human capability was. They expected me to be slow and weak, so the drones were programmed to match that expectation. But human capability is not about speed or strength. It is about adaptation, problem solving, using the environment against your enemy. She paused. I did not outrun the drones. I outsmarted them. Tovik nodded slowly. And Goro, how did you know where to strike? I spent 30 cycles studying Dorothy anatomy. Every nerve cluster, every pressure point, every weakness that your species never needed to think about because you never faced opponents who could exploit them. Yuna looked directly at him. You have been warriors for 10,000 years. But you have fought like warriors for 10,000 years, with strength, with power, with overwhelming force. You never needed to fight like prey. I have. The room was silent for a long moment. Tovik's massive chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. His face showed nothing, but Yuna could see something changing in his eyes. The contempt that had been there since her first day was gone. In its place was something else. Something that looked almost like respect. When Earth was discovered, Tovik said finally, the Galactic Union sent a survey team to assess your world. They spent 3 standard years studying your planet. They cataloged thousands of species, mapped hundreds of ecosystems, and analyzed millions of data points. He paused. Do you know what they concluded? That Earth is a Category 7 death world, Yuna said. Yes, the highest classification we have. Your planet has everything: extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, predatory wildlife, natural disasters, disease, radiation from your star, unstable climate. By every measure we use, Earth should not produce intelligent life. It should produce only death. Tovik shook his head slowly. When we learned that intelligent life had evolved there, we expected monsters. Creatures so powerful that they could survive anything your world threw at them. And instead you got us, Yuna said quietly. And instead we got you. Tovik's voice carried something like wonder. Small, fragile, soft, no natural weapons. No armor, no venom, no advantages that we could see. The survey team was confused. They thought they had made a mistake. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small data tablet. On its screen was an image of the official document that classified Earth as a death world. This document has been unchanged for 20 years, Tovik said. Today, I am recommending that it be updated. He handed the tablet to Yuna. Read it. Yuna looked at the screen. The document was long and technical, filled with measurements and analyses that she did not fully understand. But at the bottom, in a section labeled Assessment, she saw new words that had been added. She read them aloud. Classification revised. Category 7 Death World designation maintained, but threat assessment expanded. Previous assessment assumed Death World classification indicated organisms of extreme physical capability. New evidence suggests alternative interpretation. Human subjects demonstrate no significant physical advantages. However, observation indicates extreme adaptability, enhanced pattern recognition, exceptional threat assessment capabilities, and unprecedented ability to identify and exploit opponent vulnerabilities. Recommendation: reclassify human capability assessment from physical to cognitive. Note: do not underestimate. Yuna looked up from the tablet. You are rewriting the definition, she said. You rewrote it, Tovik corrected. I am simply making the official record match reality. He took back the tablet. The Galactic Union has existed for 8,000 years. We have encountered over 300 intelligent species. We thought we understood what a death world produces. We were wrong. We are not monsters, Yuna said. No, You are something else. Something we have never seen before. Something that evolved on a world that tried to kill it in every possible way, and survived not by becoming stronger than the threats, but by becoming smarter than them. Tovik's voice was serious. That is more dangerous than any monster. He turned toward the door, ducking again to fit through the frame. But before he left, he paused. You will make a fine officer, Cadet Yuna. Perhaps one of the finest this academy has ever produced. He looked back at her. I will be watching your progress with great interest. He left without another word. Yuna sat alone in the silence of her room, holding the photograph of her grandmother. She thought about everything that had happened since she arrived at the academy. She thought about the mockery, the dismissal, the certainty that everyone had that she would fail. She thought about Pyrrha's contempt and Tovik's skepticism, and Goro's confidence, and she thought about patience. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Again, this time, it was Pyrrha. The Kethany stood in the hallway, looking smaller than Yuna had ever seen her. Her forearms were folded across her chest, and her mandibles were still, unmoving. Her black eyes reflected the light from the hallway without expression. May I come in? Pyrrha asked. Yuna stepped aside and gestured toward the room. Pyrrha entered slowly, looking around as if seeing the space for the first time. She had lived here for 30 cycles, but she had never really looked at the human side of the room. Now she noticed the journal, the plant cutting, the photograph of the old woman. I was wrong about you, Pyrrha said. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. I thought you were weak. I thought you would fail. I told everyone that you would embarrass your species. I know, Yuna said. I was eliminated in the pursuit phase. You completed all 3 phases without a single hit. You defeated Goro without taking any damage. Pyrrha's mandibles clicked softly. How is that possible? I prepared, Yuna said simply. No, there is more than that. I prepared too. I trained every day. I practiced ancient techniques. I believed I was ready. Pyrrha looked directly at her roommate. But you did something different. You did not just prepare your body. You prepared your mind. You studied everything, the environment, the drones, your opponent. You turned knowledge into a weapon. Yes, where did you learn to do that? Yuna picked up the photograph and showed it to Pyrrha. My grandmother taught me. She was a survivor. She lived through a terrible war when she was young, when everything around her was destroyed. She had no strength, no weapons, no help. She survived because she paid attention. She watched her enemies and learned their patterns. She found safe places when everyone else was running. She stayed calm when everyone else was panicking. Pyrrha looked at the photograph with new eyes. The old woman in the picture seemed ordinary small, wrinkled, smiling gently. But now Pyrrha understood that this ordinary appearance hid something extraordinary. She sounds like a great warrior, Pyrrha said. She never fought anyone in her life, Yuna replied. But she survived everything. And she taught me that surviving is more important than fighting. Pyrrha was silent for a long moment. Her mandibles worked slowly, as if she was chewing on difficult thoughts. I mocked you, she said finally. I called you prey. You did. I was wrong. Pyrrha unfolded her arms and held them open, a gesture of vulnerability among her people. Will you teach me how you fight, how you think, how you survive? Yuna considered the request. For 30 cycles, she had been alone. She had studied alone, trained alone, prepared alone. She had not expected or needed anyone's help or friendship. She had been ready to succeed or fail entirely on her own, but her grandmother had taught her something else too. Humans had not survived because they were strong individuals.